the video. I want to start with this idea. What does love look like? Think about that. What does love look like? Because we use that word love. We use it as a noun. We use it as a verb. We think about different things that refer to love. But think about, what does love actually look like? Well, some people would say, you know, when you care for one another, right? That's why we're singing these songs, right? To be loving one another. Sometimes you see a picture of maybe a mother taking care of an infant, right? We see that. We see love in different ways. One of my favorites is watching a husband and a wife, or a man and a woman, or even a boyfriend, girlfriend. You can see love, at least most of the time, right? In fact, one of my, I don't even know if I should do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. One of my favorite poses that I say, this is what love looks like, is this. You take when a man and a woman actually fall for each other, this is what they look like. They take their hands together and they stand there, they clap themselves, and they got their foot up in the air like this. And that's what I look at people, I go, that person's in love. Look at them. They're standing there like this. But you got to have your toes pointed, though. You know, your toes got to be pointed. But anyways, that's what love looks like to us sometimes when you see people that really care about each other, right? That's what love is. And we can talk about love in different people and different things that we do, even foods that we eat. But what I want to talk about today is biblical love. Biblical love. 1 John chapter 3 verse 16 says this, we know love by this. This is what God's saying in His holy word. This is how we know love. That He laid down His life for us. And now we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. Because Jesus loved us and went to the cross, we need to love one another. We need to love each other. God gives Jesus. Jesus goes to the cross. And we need to love one another. Whenever we talk about love in this world, we always find that love always gets talked about in the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians. You find that in almost every Christian wedding. You will find someone talking about 1 Corinthians chapter 13, starting verse 4. Sometimes you look at the word love and you'll see it in postcards, you see it in posters, you see it in greeting cards. Talking about 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Because 1 Corinthians chapter 13 describes the excellence of love. But before we get to chapter 13, you got to remember, why did chapter 13 show up in the Bible? What's happening here? I mean, if it's about loving the husband and the wife, or the boyfriend and the girlfriend, it wouldn't be in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It would be under one of God's sermons or Jesus' sermons talking about marriage maybe. Right? But no, He inserts it in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and it comes right between, well, like Bill would say, between 12 and 14. That's where 13 is. And in chapter 12, he starts off about spiritual gifts. Spiritual gifts. This is what's happening in Corinth. These people had special, miraculous power that regular humans didn't have. We find that in verses 8 through 10. We talked about this morning in our Bible study class, how the Holy Spirit would give these people special powers. And Paul here is addressing it. Because in Corinth, there was a lot of problems in Corinth. People are people, whether it's today or it's 2,000 years ago. People are people. And in Corinth, 2,000 years ago, these people that had the spiritual gifts, a lot of them, because they're just humans, because they're just men, they get puffed up. They get puffed up and they think they're all that. That's what's happening. Men Mankind, humans, we do that. We're not supposed to, but we do that. They did that. It happens everywhere. People think more of themselves than the other person. That's the sad part. So as we get into chapter 12, he writes this about the excellence of spiritual gifts. For the what? For the building up of the church. Right? He talks about them speaking in tongues, prophesying, interpreting, healing. All these different things, the wisdom, the knowledge, all this that they will have. Right? But when he ends that chapter in chapter 12, getting ready to go to the 13th chapter, he says, But I earnestly desire the greater gifts that I show you, or still a more excellent way. There's something better than being able to do these things. There's something better than having these spiritual gifts, than to be able to speak in tongues, to be able to have this wisdom, this knowledge, this faith, to be able to interpret someone else's tongues. He goes, there's something even better than that. And then he starts in chapter 13. You got to remember, when this letter was written 2,000 years ago, there wasn't a 1 Corinthians chapter 1, 2, 3. It was just a letter. This part of the letter that they called the 13th chapter was inserted for the brethren. Chapter 12, 13, and 14, it's about the brethren. It's about the church during worship. How we have to love one another, because people don't always do that. That's the problem. So he says, I'm going to show you a more excellent way. He says the church at Corinth needed to understand love. They need to understand it. Sometimes we think we know what love is, but we don't. Not according to the Bible, not at least necessarily. Sometimes we understand the words, but to do it is the hard part, right? Anything you hear, anything that's easy to talk about, doing is always a lot more difficult. To do something is not as easy as just saying it. Remember when he opened up the letter in 1 Corinthians chapter 1? He says, there's division among you. A lot of people were already dividing themselves. They were already thinking that my camp is better than your camp. Well, you know, I'm with these guys and you're with those guys. And I studied with him and he converted me and he baptized me. And everybody was already splitting up. That's the nature of people. Sometimes it's not good. Cliques. He says, we got to love one another. We have to be together. The Corinthian church were impatient. They were unkind. They were envious. They were puffed up. They were real braggers. They were boastful. They were prideful. They were selfish. They were insensitive to others. Is that in the church today? Is that in human culture today? Yeah, it's everywhere. Sometimes it's in our families. A lot of times it's in our jobs. It's in our neighborhoods. It's in our church. It's in everybody's church, because we're human. That's why we have to look at this and see, how can I take myself up 1 notch, 2 notches? How can I improve my life? Right? Because this is a we thing. It's a we thing. The church needed to have a lesson on what love is and what love isn't. Because that's how 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is. The love chapter. So often love is misinterpreted. People don't get it. They misunderstand it. It's misapplied. But in chapter 13, the first 3 verses, tells us the presence of love. When it's there or when it's not there. It tells us the importance of love. It tells us the value of love. Well, Paul's talking about spiritual gifts, starting in chapter 13, starting with verse 1, and he discusses those spiritual gifts. He talks about tongues and knowledge and prophecy. And back in that time, were miraculous gifts back in the church that time. We don't have that today. But back in that time, if you were blessed to have these gifts, where you could prophesy, where you could interpret, where you could speak in tongues and all that, a lot of the people got puffed up. They're puffed up. They think they can do all this and all that. Brothers and sisters, I'm here to tell you, we are all equal. Amen. We are all even. Nobody's better than anybody else, especially in God's kingdom. Amen. We're always going to be trying to strive to be better. And the church here, they had a little bit of a problem. Paul's here to straighten it out, and he's going to tell them, this is what it is and this is what it isn't. All right? So he begins in verse number 1. How does he start verse number 1? He includes himself. He says, if I, Paul, the apostle, if I speak in tongues, if I speak in tongues of men and of angels, and I don't have love, what am I? Nothing. Nothing. And if Paul is nothing, who are we? Because he had revelation from Jesus Christ himself. And he included himself. He wanted everybody to know how important love is. Sometimes we don't recognize how much love is. That's why I started this with, what does love look like? What does it look like? We got to be able to spot it. We got to be able to see it. We got to understand it. Because that's what it comes down to. He goes on saying that if you have this spiritual gift and you can actually prophesy, that's preaching and having all this knowledge without studying because the Holy Spirit gave it to them. Right? And you don't have love, you're nothing. This is what he says. If you have all faith and you can move a mountain, but you don't have love, he says you're nothing. He says you could give. He says you could sacrifice your body. All these things without love is nothing. That's what the Bible teaches us. That's how important it is to understand love. To know what it looks like. It's not what we say. It's not what we believe. It's not what we do. Without love. Because those things are important. Don't get me wrong. But without love, Paul tells us that we're nothing. He begins with himself. I, Paul the apostle, talking in the first person. He gives the attention to himself. And he says, if I do these things, and I can do all these things, and I don't have love, I'm like a gong. Like a big old metal thing that they hit, and it's just a big sound. Or a cymbal. That's like back in those times, a lot of them had those little clanging cymbals where they were clanging. It's just noise if you don't have love. Love is one of those things where, brothers and sisters, we got to work on. Always. Sure, we got some. Sure, we got maybe even a dab more today than yesterday. But it's something that we have to continue to press on with. It has to be something that we want to grow with and truly understand. To be attentive to ourselves. If Paul the apostle can do all these things and still be nothing without love, who are we? Even today, here at the church. We don't have spiritual gifts today. We don't have brothers that can speak in tongues or do miracles or do any of this stuff. We have brothers that can preach a little bit. We can song lead a little bit. We can teach a couple of Bible study classes. We can do these things. But I tell you right now, if we don't have love, if I don't have love, just like Paul says, I'm nothing. Making noise. Clanging. Like a cymbal. The prophecy, the understanding the mysteries, the divine knowledge. To be able to know all these things. Whoa, without love, you're nothing. How much Bible knowledge, how much Bible understanding do we have? And if we haven't, if we really haven't, we've been studying our Bibles for so many years, and we don't have love, the answer is always going to be the same. We're nothing. God does not love the one that knows a lot of Bible. But He loves the one that knows a lot of Bible and loves. That's what God loves. Having faith, all levels of faith. Enough to move a mountain. Without love, we're nothing. Giving to feed people, feed the hungry, helping to support one another, has to be done with love. Even giving self-sacrifice has to include love. Without love, it doesn't matter what you say, what you know. Once again, it doesn't matter how much faith you have. Without love, we're nothing. That's the first 3 verses he opens this up with. That's how important love is. We got to have that. We got to understand that. Then he goes into verse number 4, from verses 4 to verse number 8. Here, in this part of the chapter, he identifies love. He identifies the qualities of love, the characteristics of love. He clarifies love. He describes the nature of love, the properties of love, and the effects of love. From verses 4 to 8, there's 15 things that are mentioned here about love. What it is and what it isn't. The positives, 7 positives and 8 negatives. The things that it isn't. And when we look at this, we'll know how much we need to work on ourselves. Ourselves. Because Paul talks about himself, we need to talk about ourselves. All of us need to grow in love. Love is one of those things where you can't have too much of. We always need more. So once again, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, starting with verse 4, you'll find that in weddings, you find that in Valentine cards, you find it in a lot of different things that they talk about love. And it describes it here. It says, love is patient. Right? Are we patient? Being patient means we get through those hardships. The evil. We get through it. We get through the pain. We get through the trials. We get through the long suffering. We're having patience to wait for the results. That's what we need. It's a characteristic of a mature Christian. That's what patience is. When you're mature as a Christian, you're going to be a lot more patient than when you weren't. So it's something that we have to work on. It gives us strength to deal with and to put up with negative things that are happening. Gives us the strength to get through those difficult situations. Things that are not easy. And being patient helps us so that we don't get angry fast. You know how easy it is to get mad? Just fly off the handle? I mean, I think most of us understand how that works if we're not partakers of that. Anger? That's because we're not patient. We get mad. We get mad too easy. We get mad too fast. Why? Because maybe we don't have enough love. Love is patient. Love is kind, ready to do good. You're ready to do something good. If you got love, you're kind to people. Everybody. Not just, well, that's my buddy, so I'm going to be nice to him, but I don't have to be nice to anybody else. Kindness is everybody. That's what we're talking about here. The kindness of love. Helping hands. Open hearts. Galatians chapter 6 verse 10 says, whenever we have the opportunity to do good unto all men, especially those in the household of faith, especially those in the church. So many times we have functions. And sometimes we have functions and we have a lot of unsung heroes. Amen. We have so many sisters that do so much work. And people don't even know they're doing it. I know they're doing it. Sometimes I tell them, and sometimes you get these sisters that they're so humble, they don't embarrass me. Don't embarrass me. Right? But you sisters know who you are. You know what you've done. You know what you've been doing. You know what you're going to do. Because, why? Because you got love and because you're kind. That's why. That's why these things get done. That's why things get done here. Because there's love. That's why it's done. If there's no love here, it's like, I don't care about you. I'm just going home, watch TV. Right? That's easy to do. But when we got love, we're going to try to do things. We're going to do things for one another. You know that word for one another in the New Testament shows up a lot more times than you realize. You might want to take a moment to look at those words. One another. For each other. Love is not jealous. See, this is a not now. What it is kind. It is patient. But this is what it isn't. This is a negative. It is not jealous. So many times, people envy the other person. And it's like, that's where coveting comes in. If we love, we would not be jealous. We would not be jealous, but we would be happy with the other person. We would celebrate with the other person. We would not envy someone else's well-being. We wouldn't envy that person. We wouldn't think like that. But instead, we would be happy for that person. We would rejoice with that person. We would celebrate with that person. We would wish goodness on that person. Otherwise, we're jealous. We're jealous. We don't want to be jealous. God doesn't want us to be jealous. So love is not jealous. Love does not brag. It does not vault itself up. It doesn't build itself up. It's not boastful. Look at me, look at me, look at me. You know what I did? You know what I did? Look at me. And I'm gonna. Love does not brag. It's not boastful, but humble. Like I said, some of these sisters, they get mad at me if I mention their names because they're humble. We have a lot of fine people in this congregation. Fine people. And that's why I love being here. That's why I love the assembly here. That's why just to think about trying to be God's people and living in a situation where you don't have love, it's rough. I've been in congregations where I go there and you walk in, it's like, whoa, anybody smiling around here? They walk by you, hi, nobody wants to say hi to you. We want to be loving people. But love does not brag. It's not arrogant. It's not puffed up, thinking highly of self, being rude to others. Because a person that's arrogant is always going to be rude to somebody else because it's all about them. Love doesn't do that. It does not act unbecomingly. It's respectful. It's a respectful person. It extends courtesy. It extends goodwill. It's being a decent human being. Mindful of others. Minding their own business so they don't get in everybody's business. Taking the high road. Just taking the high road. Being courteous. Being respectful. It doesn't become unseemly. Love does not seek its own. That's selfishness. It's not self-seeking. Sometimes, when people are selfish, they're looking for praise. They're looking for profit. They're looking for pleasure. And that's what self-seeking is. It's not about me, me, me. It's about us. It's about we. It's about the church. Jesus made very clear for us to love thy neighbor, to love the brethren, and love the church. Another thing that love is not, it's not provoked. It doesn't overreact, right? Sometimes we know people, sometimes it's us. We overreact, right? Somebody says something, what? Come calm down, brother. Calm down. You know, people get excited too fast. You know, we get easily provoked. I mean, this sermon's for all of us, especially, I mean, all of us can grow, understanding how much work we need. Love is not provoked. We want to be in self-control. We don't want to be easily angered. We want to be forgiving. Forgiving. Watching our tempers. Having restraint. That's what we want to do. James chapter 1 verse 19 says that some of these things that we should be thinking about, we should be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, right? Listen more. Relax. If we don't forgive, that's another problem we're having, because that's the next one. Love does not take account for wrongs that are suffered. Sometimes we remember more than we need to remember. We need to forget some of the things that have happened. That's what true forgiveness is. To not take account of wrong suffered means don't take revenge, don't be malice, don't keep a record, don't keep score, don't think evil, right? Peter says, how often should I forgive? 7 times? 7 times 70? Right? So chop them off, right? So I'm writing it down, right? I got a book, wrote down everything you did that you hurt my feelings, right? And I'm counting them right now. Okay, well, we're getting close now. Any time now, I can... No, it doesn't. You do not keep records. When you forgive somebody, you got to forgive somebody. When you forgive, you got to forget. You got to let it go. That's what love is. You know, that's the forgiveness part of our lessons. We could talk about that for a long time, and a lot of us struggle with that. A lot of us struggle with forgiveness. Right? But Jesus says, if you don't forgive, how do you expect God to forgive you? Letting go. We've got to be able to do that. Like I said, a lot of this stuff here, we got to work on. Forgiving is not easy for some of us. For some of us, one of these things might be easy, one of these things might be difficult. You know, there's 15 of them here. Right? Which one can you do? Which one can't do? The idea is do all 15 of them. All 15 of them. That's the idea. So we are to understand forgiveness. Right? We don't want to be people that says, you know what you did? Like that one. You know what you did? No, what did I do? What do you do? So they tell you what you did. And I tell you when you did this. I tell you when you did that. I remember when you did this. A mature Christian that's working on their love doesn't do that. Or shouldn't do that. Here's another negative. Love does not rejoice in unrighteousness. You're not happy in sin. You don't celebrate sin. You don't celebrate hurting somebody. You're not wishing ill to anybody. Right? Being happy or rejoicing when others fail. Sometimes that's done. We're not supposed to do that. As mature Christians, we do not rejoice in unrighteousness. But we rejoice with the truth. That's what we rejoice with. The Word. The Word is truth. The Gospel is truth. Rejoicing when others do well. Celebrating when others do well. Always seeking for the truth and not lies. Making sure that whatever the truth is, it's the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Like we were talking about in the Bible study class today, you don't want to add words to the text. You don't want to add words to what God said. The truth is what God says, the Word. That's it. We stay with that. And that's what we do. Always looking for the truth. That's what we want to do. We rejoice with it. Love bears all things. You hear that? That means we endure. That means we have strength, we have patience, we have kindness. getting through these difficult times in life. And there are many difficult times in life. And I tell you something, brothers and sisters, sometimes things happen to us where we're having a hard time. And I need somebody to help me bear my burden. Right? That's what we got to be ready to do, to help somebody else to bear all things. People need help. All of us, life can be great and dandy, and we're just having a good time for X amount of time. All of a sudden there's a problem. There's a storm in life. And it might be one of those things that knock you down. Somebody's got to help get you up. Somebody's got to help pick you up. Somebody's got to help pick me up. That's what it is. We need to be able to help bear one another's burdens. To help each other in a real time of need. In a real time of hardship. Love believes all things. That doesn't mean gullible. That means, go tell that brother anything. He'll believe everything you say. That doesn't mean that. To believe all things, meaning that you believe the good in somebody. You believe looking for the best in somebody. Looking good in every situation. The best in every person. That's what believes all things. Not to be gullible. And you always want the best. You believe that this person can actually do this. You encourage the person to do these things. You help strengthen them. You be part of the building process. That's what bearing all things and believing all things is. Hopes all things. Hopes being optimistic. Thinking for the better. Thinking for the greater. Hoping for the very best. That's what hopes all things is. We're on number 15 now. Endures all things. Endurance. Strength to continue. Never quitting. Getting through, once again, those rough times, the trials, the tribulations, the hardships. Love will give us strength. In verse 8, he says, love never fails. Love is eternal. It's with us in heaven. It continues on and on, never ending. 1 John chapter 4, verse 7 8 says, Beloved, let us love one another. For love is of God, and everyone that loves is born of God and knows God. The one who does not love does not know God. Why? Because God is love. God is love. And we have a song in our songbook that sings these exact words right out of Scripture. Beloved, let us love one another. Hymn number 846. And it tells you that it's 1 John 4, 7, and 8. Because God loved us so much, John 3:16, He sent His Son. Because Jesus loved us so much, He went to the cross. John 15, verse 13. And while we were yet sinners, when we weren't even cleaned up yet, He died for us. Romans chapter 5, verse 8. That's what love is. So what does love look like? It does look like something, It's visible. It's really, truly visible. That's why I asked that question. What does love look like? If God is love, then love looks like God, or looks like godliness, right? Or the image of God, right? Do we really, truly understand love? Do we really, truly practice all its principles? Does love look like us? Do we look like love? 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4 through 8 says, love is patient, love is kind. We went through this, right? Think about that. If God is love, then God is patient, God is kind. Right? Jesus is patient, Jesus is kind. Right? How about us? Can we put our name there? Can we put our name there? Can we say, brother so-and-so is patient. Brother so-and-so is kind. Can we say that? Can you put your name there? We want to be able to. We need to be able to. We need to encourage everybody to be able to say, we are patient, we are kind. We want to take ourselves to a level of Christian maturity. That's where we want to go. You know, the greatest commandment was asked of Jesus Christ. And this is what he answered. Matthew chapter 22, verses 37 to 40 says, you shall love the Lord, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. Love God. The second one is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And on these two commandments depend the whole law and prophet. We need to understand love. We want to practice love. This is what we want to be able to do. So at this time, I'd like to offer an invitation to anyone who's outside of the body of Christ, who doesn't really understand love from above, to be able to receive that love by becoming a Christian, to receive that love by obeying the gospel, or anybody else that might have a need for whatever reason. But love is one of those things that we can never have enough of, we can never do enough of. We might keep that in our hearts, to love one another. At this time, stand.